Usually we hear Devar Torah a little later in our service, but my absolute favorite moment in liturgy is coming up soon. And it only happens once a year, and it warrants a little bit of explanation. So Passover links the transformation of the Israelites from slavery to freedom with the renewal of the natural world around us in the springtime. The narrative of our holiday is full of the hope and promise of liberation as the Israelites take their first steps as a people reborn into freedom, ready to grow, ready to thrive. This is mirrored in the tiny buds of spring that will so quickly become an exuberance of greens and purples and reds. Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld writes beautifully of the hope and potential in this season. Winter ends, blossoms reappear, birds return, love rises again, and so will you. We mark this season in our liturgy each week. For about 6 months, as we chant the Amidah, we've included the phrase Mashiv HaRuach u'Morid HaGashem, who makes the wind blow and the rain fall. But in Israel, we are now entering the dry season, and rain is completely out of the question. So instead, we begin saying Morid HaTal, who makes dew descend. To mark this transition, we stand before the open ark and recite a poem called Tal, dew. When I first experienced this ritual about 15 years ago, I found it absolutely fascinating. Parts of the traditional chant borrow from the slow, almost haunting melodies that conclude Yom Kippur. The cantor wears a white robe, and in the Givurot prayer, where we say the words Morid HaTal, who makes dew descend, we make this jarring interruption. Instead of continuing on with this familiar prayer as we do week after week, we insert Tal, a 7th century poem. This high drama liturgical moment underscores the absolute importance of water. It is a non-negotiable necessity of life, something our ancestors in ancient Israel were acutely aware of, living in an agrarian society where water is scarce and precious. Today, we are not all farmers, and so this ritual has become an opportunity to reflect not only on water and our agricultural needs, but also on an entire season of productive labors. What have we been working on? How did it go? What do we hope our metaphorical harvest will yield in the season to come? We might like to think that our success is a direct result of our efforts, but our liturgy reminds us that we are also at the mercy of forces beyond our control. No amount of tilling and sowing and nurturing can make the sun shine or the rain fall. Sometimes, despite our efforts, our harvest just comes up short. This ritual, marking the changing of the season, happens again after Sukkot in the fall, when we switch back to the rainy season, recite a prayer called Geshem. But Tal, the prayer for dew we recite tonight, is my favorite. As a cantor, all parts of the liturgy are my favorite, but this one a little bit more favorite than the rest. Rain is ordinary. We talk about it all the time. We complain about rain all the time. But there's something particularly exquisite about a dewdrop gently resting on a newly emerged leaf. You can even hear the droplets' gentle patter with the music. Tal, 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 ten. Dew is not a double-edged sword like rain, which we know too well has devastating destructive potential. With dew, there's no threat that this life-giving moisture will overwhelm the Sewerage and Water Board. Now, just to be safe, let me state unequivocally that this is not a challenge for that favorite local government agency to discover the hidden destructive potential of dew. Authors of literature, sacred and secular, alike, find deep meaning in these tiny droplets. Poet laureate Joy Harjo writes in The Life of Beauty, "There were many beauties in this age, green greener than the impossibility of green, the taste of wind after it slide through dew grass at dawn." The book of Proverbs emphasizes the gentle nature of dew, saying, "The rage of a king is like the roar of a lion, his favor like dew upon the grass." The Torah uses dew as a symbol of blessing and bounty. In Genesis chapter 27, Isaac blesses Jacob. "May God give you of the dew of heaven and the fat of the earth, abundance of new grain and wine." The Torah concludes with Moses' farewell address, in which he says, "May this land be blessed by God with the bounty of dew from heaven." In the Torah, dew is otherworldly, heaven-blessed goodness. Tal, dew, also makes an appearance near the end of the Mishnah, a 2nd century compendium of Jewish practice. Chapter 4 of Tractate Yadayim tells a fascinating, if somewhat convoluted, story. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah examine a situation which, long story short, leads to a little bit of ambiguity about what to do with the tithe from a field. Rabbi Tarfon says it should go to the poor. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says it should instead be directed to the temple in Jerusalem. Rabbi Ishmael enters the debate as referee, asking his colleagues to justify their positions. And in Egypt, it's done this way, but in Babylon, it's done that way. Back and forth, they argue, seeing he's losing the debate, and that this additional tithe will ultimately go to support the hungry instead of being dedicated to God. Rabbi Elazar lashes out, "Harei atah himhanan mamon." You appear to benefit them. Ve'ein atah ella chemafsid nefashot. Yet you really cause them to perish. He continues, "Would you rob the heavens so that dew or rain should not descend? In that case, those you wish to help will suffer even more in the future." Rabbi Elazar ultimately loses the debate, and the tithe goes to support the hungry instead of going to the temple, which it sounds like the right decision. But his question gives me pause. Would you rob the heavens so that dew should not descend? For centuries, we saw the natural world around us, the intricate systems of air and water, flora and fauna, as something well beyond our control. And what an absurd proposition to rob heaven and therefore cause a drought. But nearly 2 millennia after this story was written, we see the devastating impact humanity can have on the environment. Systems our ancestors thought were in the hands of God alone. For how long have we been robbing the heavens? How much longer can we rely on the gentle blessing of dew? The world around us is so much more fragile than we ever thought. As William Butler Yeats writes, "All things hang like a drop of dew upon a blade of grass." Looking at this in a broader metaphorical sense, Rabbi Elazar's question brings out a tension that feels incredibly familiar here in New Orleans. Resources are limited, and we have urgent needs today, needs for food, for shelter, needs for health and safety. The immediacy of those concerns, though, can distract from equally existential problems on the horizon. Are we robbing the heavens despite our best intentions? What is the cost today to ensure that our schools, our roads, our pipes, our infrastructure will be there to support us in the decades to come? The delicate coastal ecosystem protects us and sustains us here, but only if we protect it from us. Rabbi Elazar seems to intuit how easy it is for the pressing needs of today, the pressing needs right in front of us, to overshadow the necessary work of investing to create the future we hope for. So in a moment, we'll chant the Amidah, and in the middle of the Givrut prayer, we'll pause to recite Tal before the open ark to mark this new season. For us here in this room, our harvest today may not be in grain or grapes, but as the seasons change, we're given an opportunity to reflect on the fruits of our labor. After 6 months of work, of school, of your efforts spent, how was your harvest? Was your field nourished with life-giving dew? Was it, despite your best efforts, too dry a season to yield the bounty you'd hoped for? And especially, how can we avoid robbing the heavens? What's left over to put toward the future, ensuring the world we leave behind is more whole for those who come after us?